You're listening to the Good Radio Network, radio that does a world of good.
Have you ever met one of those people who just can't be stopped? It's like they're unstoppable.
Yeah, I have.
Me too. What's their mystique?
Nothing stops these people.
Don't stop.
Welcome to Mission Unstoppable with Coach Frankie Picasso. You're about to meet some of the most amazing people. They've accomplished their goals despite insurmountable odds. They beat adversity, physical hardship, and traumatic events, and emerged triumphantly. They're people just like you and me, and they're winners. Are you unstoppable? Here's Frankie to show you how.
Good day to you wherever you are in the world. This is Frankie Picasso, and today we are going on another Mission Unstoppable. But first I'm going to tell you a little story. I started Mission Unstoppable in 2007, and in around 2013, I had the last show. I debated about continuing this show because, I did love it a lot, but, you do something for a long time and you kind of get a little bored with it, and I thought it was time to do something new. So through the show, I've been able to introduce you to the most amazing individuals, people who don't let anything stop them from what they want. And just like, the intro says, nothing stops these people. Since the end of the show, I went on hiatus, and I started a new radio network called the Good Radio Network. And this is a socially conscious radio station that goes beyond talk into doing. So it's radio that does good things for the world, radio that makes a difference. And I can't tell you how important that was to me to help make the world a better place. But I kept meeting these unstoppable people, and I thought, I really need a place to put them. So when I decided to resurrect the show, I needed two things. I needed to do a new intro, you just heard it, and I needed a new logo. So I went to a past provider for the sweep, but the logo I had done on Fiverr, and I don't know if you've ever used Fiverr, it's Fiverr, but the gigs are $5. Even I coach on Fiverr. I kind of consider it my pro bono work to coach someone for $5. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know how great some of the talent is on Fiverr. And I share the love, so to speak, and I hired, 3 designers to interpret my logo. And I was a little bit disappointed because no one got it. They didn't get, it's unstoppable. They're unstoppable. They've gone through trials and, tragedies and whatever, but they've gone through all these obstacles and come out the other side stronger. But the last designer sent me his file, and I said, thanks, it's okay. I don't really need them. I'm not going to use your design. But he asked me to give him another chance. He said, I want to get it right. So he wanted to keep trying until I loved it. And I do love it now. And so you see, here again is someone who's unstoppable. He's trying to grow his business. He's on the other side of the world. And this is what sets him apart from the others in his genre. He just wanted to keep going until he got it right. And that's what unstoppable people do. Today, you are going to meet an extraordinary woman who, for most of her life, has been on her own mission unstoppable. She's a child of the Holocaust, a survivor who has been known by 3 different names, a Jewish child who found safety and love in the bosom of a Christian family, a girl who found solace in the Catholic Church, prayed to a loving Jesus, and a woman who would come to embrace Judaism in her own way. And while it seemed that Hitler waged war on Poland's Jews with a singular devotion, a need to try and exterminate them from the face of the earth, they missed one little Jewish rosebud in the town of Bosnia. Welcome, Lucia Weitzman. Welcome to the show, Lucia.
Thank you, Frankie. Nice to be here.
It's so great that you are here and that we're able to speak to you. Lucia, for the past 50 years, you have been, I guess you could call it a spiritual journey, a transformation that has taken you across the globe several times. You've been from Poland to Belgium to Israel to New York to Machu Picchu and back to Poland and Israel again and back to New York. As a child, when you were sleeping on that cot in the Schwatek's apartment, did you ever dream that you would end up living the life that you have?
No, I never dreamed that would be the life that I have, but I did have a dream, sleeping on the cot, as you mentioned, in this little apartment in Bochnia, Poland, as my adoptive parents. I always was dreaming of a train, that someday I will be on the train, and now my journey will start on the train. So that was my dream, and I think the dream came true. I started with the train, but I ended up with their plane, and I went all over the world, and through my experiences, I want to convey to you. So my journey started in Poland as child of the Holocaust survivor. My parents gave me away to the Polish couple, Christian couple, when I was 2 years old to save my life. And that couple adopted me, but my parents didn't survive. Then I was left with the Polish couple as their daughter on the assumed name. After the war, in 1945, one of the relatives survived the Auschwitz and came to look for me through the town, and she uncovered my real identity. I was a Catholic girl with the couple, and then suddenly I was Jewish. I was 5 years old.
And how old were you? 5 years old when you found out?
I was 5 years old when I found out, when the relatives came to the house and wanted to take me away and give me to the Jewish orphanage. At that time, I didn't know who I was.
Right. You there's a book that you've just written with your son Mitchell, and it's called The Rose Temple. And I'm gonna introduce Mitchell right now, so he can chime in when he wants to, and it doesn't sound a little odd. He actually authored the book as you told him the stories. As I said, it's The Rose Temple. And Mitchell is an attorney. He works for the Food and Drug Administration. He's a graduate of New York University and George Washington University Law School. He's a longtime columnist for the Washington Jewish Week, and he's written for several peer-reviewed and consumer healthcare publications. Welcome, Mitchell.
Thank you, Frankie. It's a real pleasure to be on your program.
I know that the book isn't, quote-unquote, out yet, but I was able to read the manuscript cover to cover, and it's just fabulous. You are a really great writer. I just wanted to get that in there.
Frankie, thanks so much. It was a real labor of love. I mean, we spent, my mother and I, nearly 20 years writing this book because, as you know, and many of you know, it's a book about a journey, and
right.
You're not sure exactly when the journey is going to end. And every time I thought that we were sort of done, it kept going, which was fine because, I think that we stopped at a point where, we really realized we were ready to go out with the message that we have.
So, Lucia, you were 5 years old, and your name at the time was Alicia. Did I pronounce it right?
Yes, at that time was Alicia Świątek. Yes, that was my name.
And you were born Rose, you became Alicia, and then you took on Lucia.
And then,
it's no wonder you didn't know who you were. You had all these names.
No, but when I was 5 years old and the relative uncovered my identity, she was looking for me, and then the whole town found out that I was not Alicia Świątek, I was a Jewish girl.
Right.
And when we had a neighbor and landlord who was very nice to me all the time. And then when the relatives told him that this is a Jewish girl living in his place, then she went and he threw a brick at me, almost hit my head. And that was shock to me. I didn't know why. One moment she was good to me, one moment he hit the brick at me, wanted to kill me, and I was the same girl. And I ran to my parents, to my adopted parents, and then he called me a Jew. So I asked, what is Jew? Who am I? And then they explained to me, and they had to explain to me that I was Jewish, that my parents were Jewish, and I didn't know what was Jewish. I didn't know anything about it.
And you thought, as a little girl, didn't you think that you must be bad because the Nazis had killed the Jews, and so if people hated the Jews, that must mean that you weren't good either? Did you?
Yeah, well, then after he hit the brick at me, then I thought that he wanted to kill me because I was bad. I didn't know why I was bad, but I assumed I was bad because my parents were killed and they were Jews, they were bad. So the Jews were bad and I was bad. I did not know.
What kind of names did were you called in Poland? I'm just curious because I'm always asked, why do people hate the Jews? And so you were there, and I'm just wondering, what kind of names did they call you? What did they think of the Jews, really?
What did they think about Jews? My classmate called me a dirty Jew, and I did not know why I was a dirty Jew. I was going to church every day. I was going to church before I went to school. I went to church after the school. But I assumed that the Jews were bad because they were killed, and they must have done something wrong. But I did not know what. I was happy in church. I was secure in church. I felt God in church. I could connect to God in church. But when I went outside of the church, that was the dilemma started. So my protection was the church. Only when I was, and I didn't think much about it. I thought they were bad, so I wanted to be the best. I was the best.
Right.
I was the best daughter. I was always trying to be the best. And instead of sitting in the back row, I was sitting in the front row because that's the choice I made. Not to defeat it, but to go forward. And then I was affected more.
So I think you raise a really interesting point, though, and I think that's what is a little bit different about my mother's story than some other, some other survivor stories or some other things that you may have heard. You may have heard, for example, that many Jewish children were hidden in convents or hidden with other families. And never knew they were Jewish, and maybe never found out until they were, even much later in life. Even today, people are finding out about their Jewish background. I think the difference here is because of the circumstance. She found out at age 5,
right.
And despite that, she spends the next, 15 years, still going to church as a Jew, even though she didn't know what that meant. So you wonder, even though she was practicing Catholic. And for so many years in the history of Jewish-Christian relations, that was a point of contention. Don't be Jewish anymore, be a Catholic. And yet, here she was. She was a practicing Catholic, and yet still, as she describes, called names as a Jew. That's really, like you suggest, a curious and fascinating situation.
It is.
So, Frankie. So I was happy in the church and. Fighting the outside world, being courageous, being the best, not sitting in the back, by going in the front. But that changed after I was around the first year of gymnasium, in maybe 15 years old, and I went for the first time for the Passion to church with the schoolmates. And at that time, I heard from the priest that the Jews were responsible for Jesus' death, and so this was going on and on. For the first time, I was alone, not with my adopted mother attending the church. We were school kids attending the Passion. And at that time, I felt all the children were looking at me. I felt guilty. I felt terrible. I felt like such a burden, a shame on me that I almost fainted. My girlfriend, a good girlfriend, was standing next to me, and she said, "Allah," that's how she called me, "I have to take you out because you're going to faint." Then she took me to school to a nurse, and they excused me from the rest of the Passion.
Wow.
I talked to the cemetery, and I said, I have to understand now. For the first time in all these years, I understood why he wanted to kill me, why is such a hate for the Jews, because they were blamed for Jesus' death. That's what the priests were teaching. And then I started to think at 15, who am I? Who am I? Why I was saved? Maybe I should pray for my people who were so bad. But then I started to think, how am I going to pray? In who am I?
What did you think? You had this love for Jesus. So what did you think when you found out that the Jews were supposedly responsible for killing Jesus? Did you think, well, I don't want to be one of those, I'm not going to be? Or did you think, what thoughts went through? Nobody said you had to be. right? You didn't have to adopt Judaism.
I felt guilty. I felt guilty for my people that they were responsible for such a crime. And I wanted to pray, but I did fall for them. Why I was saved? Maybe I was saved because I have to pray for my people. I did not. Was the biggest confusion in me, and since then I went back to church, I went back to school, but then my life changed. That was a pivotal point that I understood that was a terrible thing done. And
sorry, my daughter in grade 2 came home crying from school because somebody had said to her that she couldn't, she was responsible for killing Jesus. And, her father is Catholic and her mother's Jewish. And, all I could think of was there weren't any Christians. There were no Christians back then. So who did they think killed? Doesn't make sense that they would blame a people. You can only blame who was around at the time, right? Jesus was Jewish.
Yes, that's very true. But then they were not teaching that. Okay, whatever they were teaching in school, whatever the textbook were saying, exactly what the priest was saying. The Jews killed Jesus, and so on and on. Okay, so the children were taught this way, and then it was with them. Children.
Mitchell, you wanted to say something?
Oh no! I was going to say no, and that's exactly right, and that's why this Wednesday, I believe, the 28th of October, is the anniversary of Nostra Aetete, which was the Vatican II's declaration that Jews are not responsible for killing Jesus, and it really sort of legitimized Judaism. And I think in that declaration, there's so many things to say about it. Number one, I think it gives us all great hope that, despite the 1800, 1900 year history and violence and death caused by these teachings, corrective measures were taken. And I think today those relations are much better.
I'm going. If you guys will let me, I'm going to give a few quotes from that document because I found it very interesting.
Absolutely.
With the 50th anniversary coming. It starts with, in our time when day by day mankind is being drawn closer together between different peoples are becoming stronger, the church examines more closely her relationships to non-Christian religions. In her task of promoting unity and love among men, indeed among nations, she considers above all in this declaration what men have in common and what draws them to fellowship. And one is the community of all peoples, one, their origin for God made the whole human race to live over the face of the earth. Now, this was 1965, right? They wrote this.
Right.
It next goes on to say, and I find this interesting, the church regards with esteem also the Muslims, because they adore the one God, living and subsisting in himself, merciful and all-powerful, the creator of heaven and earth, who has spoken to men, and they take pains to submit wholeheartedly to even his inscrutable decrees, just as Abraham, with whom the faith of Islam takes pleasure in linking itself, submitted to God. Though they do not acknowledge Jesus as God, they revere him as a prophet, and they also honor Mary, his virgin mother. It goes on to say, since in the course of centuries, not a few quarrels and hostilities have arisen between Christians and Muslims, the Sacred Synod urges all to forget the past and to work sincerely for mutual understanding and to preserve as well as to promote together for the benefit of all mankind social justice and moral welfare, as well as peace and freedom. And then it says, and since the spiritual patrimony common to Christians and Jews is thus so great, the Sacred Synod wants to foster and recommend that mutual understanding and respect, which is the fruit, above all, of biblical and theological studies, as well as fraternal dialogues. So true, the Jewish authorities and those who followed their lead pressed for the death of Christ. Still, what happened in his passion cannot be charged against all Jews without distinction, then alive, nor against Jews of today. And although the church is the new people of God, the Jews should not be presented as rejected or accursed by God, as if this followed them from Holy Scripture. All should see to it that then in catechetical work or in the preaching of God, in the Word of God, they do not teach anything that does not conform to the truth of the gospel and the Spirit of Christ. And so in her rejection of every persecution against man, the church, mindful of patrimony, she shares with the Jews and moved not by political reason, but by the gospel's spiritual love, decries hatred, persecution, displays of anti-Semitism, and directed against Jews at any time and by anyone. So the church is saying, we love everybody. We're not going to blame the Jews anymore. We love the Muslims because they love us. And, Bob's your uncle. But is there hope in this document?
Well, I think I think there certainly is, and I think that the question that we've thought of, and that others might ask, can you imagine if this document had been issued in, let's say, 1935 instead of 1965? Would it have made a difference? Would it have kind of seeped in, from the bishops to the individual pastors to the pews, and could have. That may have changed certainly my mother's entire life.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking when I found out about it in 1965 about the Declaration.
Mm-hmm.
How different my life would be. I'm just the example. Maybe they are texts, and you can just learn from books how it would be, what it would be, how the life would be. But I am the living example. I lived through since the age of 5. And the teaching made a tremendous, painful experience for me throughout the years. How my life would have been if this would be before. Maybe the Holocaust would never happen. Maybe I would never leave Poland. Maybe I would be with my adoptive parents. Who knows how it would be? But the pain and suffering which I experienced in the most formative years, this doesn't go away. This stays in. So my message is children are not, and the children who are calling me names, children are not born with hate. Children are born with love. And children are the future. So in my case is that the Nostra Aetete was very important, because that opened up the window for dialogue between Jews and Christians, between teachings, and there is a future. There is a light. At least if this continues, then there is a hope. That there is a hope for a better world. And that's why I think that my experience and my coming up with the message is very important, because I am the living example. There are a lot of children of the Holocaust, but no one lived in 21 years as the only Jew in town, being Catholic, going to church every day. That was my rescue. And still being called a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if this would, and feel guilty for something that I did not commit. I found myself that I had the burden on my shoulder because I was very spiritual. I always was connecting to God. I always felt His protection. So I think that this is a very important event. And I think in today's world, I watch the Pope, who is now trying to spread tolerance between people. And I think the Pope went to the Western Wall in Jerusalem. I think it's a very important document that has a future.
And Frankie, you in the passage that you read, we should also note that you mentioned Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in today's age, in today's world, we all see what's happening around in the world around us. It would be wonderful to hear those voices, and there are those voices of tolerance. So I don't think it's just relevant to the Christian Jewish world. I think it's relevant to between all religions.
But okay, I'm going to ask you something, and I'm interested in your response. What if there was no religion and just faith and love and peace? Because it seems that religion and politics are really the two things that get people the most heated. And so what if we all just believed in God and it didn't matter how we found him? Is it important to have these different faiths?
Well, I guess I'd answer that by saying there's an old saying, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. So I think religion can and is a force of good. That's many of our values, our moral and our ethical values, derived from religion. It's not religion in itself, I think, that is always the problem. I think it's interpretations of it, and it's the way we act. We can certainly use religion for a force of good. I believe that Lord Sachs in England just came out with a book recently that pretty much talks about that, religion as a force of good.
Lucia, you've been to the Wailing Wall. You've been to Israel several times.
Yes.
So have you, Mitchell.
Yes.
Over 2,000 years of strife between Arabs and the Jews on this little strip of land, and what do you? It boggles my mind that they hold on to whatever it is that they hold on to, and they can't come out of the dark ages and find peace with one another. Why is that? What in your opinion, why is that?
I don't know. I can't answer that, Frankie. I only can tell you that I have gone through 3 parts of my journey in my lifetime as I am now. I went to Catholics, I went to Judaism, and during the process of this book, during my transformation and my beliefs and searching for God, I found the spirituality. I found that I rose above the religion, and I am the same person. I'm the same person through all my life. But
right.
My peace I found when I was at the wall. I had seen only me and God. I had seen only that I was grateful that I can feel his presence, that I can rise above this, and I can convey a message. Okay,
and I think that's the next level for all of us. That's what I mean. I think that's where all of us are striving to go beyond the player, let's say, and move into the next realm of spirituality, which is having that relationship.
Yes,
and I think that's partly why we, partly that speaks to the name of the book, The Rose Temple. It's not a physical place that we envision when we say the Rose Temple. Rose, of course, is my mother's birth name.
Right.
But I think we speak of it in sort of the terms that you're referring to it as. It's a place to bring in divine light and peace and harmony. It's not a place where 3 major religions have to fight for space and
right.
guards. I think that's exactly what we're saying. So I think you hit on it.
Right.
Excellent.
I also want to add to it that through all this, my life experiences, the choice was a major thing, okay? The choices we make, the choices we believe in, that's what's very powerful. And I want to go back to my childhood. I have made the choice, whether I realized it was a choice or not choice. I have made the choice as a 5-year-old girl to stand in front, not in the back.
Right.
And I got the power. I made the choice, made a difference in the world, so I can speak about it now. I have made the choice later and draw the strength from my action. And individual choice make a difference in the global choices. And that's what I think is very important. We make the choices, we believe into the choices, how we want, like the Polish couple who saved me, they went against the worst in the world.
Yeah.
But they made a choice, and that's the choice.
And I want to mention that your adopted father, he went to the police when that brick was thrown. He went and fought for you several times for justice, which must have been very unpopular.
He went for justice. He fought when the brick went over my head, but he lost because the majority of the police were not for him. And then when I was 10 years old, he took me to court in a big court in Krakow. And he could not afford the lawyer, so he was defending me. Me by himself, but the landlord had a lawyer, and we lost the case. I was just 10 years old, frightened little girl, and with the cross-examination, they won. I said something wrong, from fear, from whatever. So he thought about the justice all along. But he also made a choice. He made the choice to fight.
He did. And I'm really happy to say that Israel honored him. They honored your adopted parents as righteous among nations, individuals, and they were given a certificate and a medal, which bears the Talmudic expression, whoever saves one life is as though he has saved the entire world. And their names were engraved on the honor wall in the Garden of the Righteous Yad Vashem. That's pretty amazing. That was 1996. So you nominated them.
Yes, I did. I wanted to mention something about my son, but he's on the phone. But he was the one who made the whole happening.
Nice.
He was fighting for years for it, and finally was there. The choices was my adoptive parents made. Was my choice was my children continue. Mitchell was working with me for 20 years on that book. That was his choice, and that was his contribution. He didn't have to do that, but he did it. He felt my life, and that was his choice on this lifetime. My daughter didn't stand behind. She traveled with me. She encouraged me. I could not do it without my children. So
right.
So the continuation is also very important for the next generation to make the choices.
So, Frankie, I wanted just to tell you a little bit about, why really I chose to write the book, and why I devoted all that time to it.
Yes.
And I think that's it. You've heard some of her story. And I was always affected by the Holocaust since I was a child, as many children of survivors are.
Sure.
We try to make sense. We try to make sense of the world that we were brought into. We didn't have grandparents, we didn't have uncles, we didn't have aunts, and all of our parents spoke with these strange accents. So, we were in America, so we were trying to make sense of the world. So, I sort of had it in me since I was young to seek expression of it. But it wasn't until my mother really began sort of the spiritual journey that she describes in the book, and sort of looking back at her past and the circumstances and trying to figure out what it taught her and what it taught all of us. That's what really inspired me to write the book. It was my mother's attitude. She could have been bitter from all of this, and I'm frankly amazed that she wasn't. Her childhood was completely turned upside down, completely turned asunder. She had a harrowing experience just to escape Poland and go on this journey. And I said, my God, that would make me bitter and angry at God. And yet you hear her speaking, and you hear her faith and her messages of hope, and that just amazes me, and I admire her for it, and that's the primary reason that I wrote this book.
Excellent, and I understand that. I have to ask you this question, because as I was reading the book, it just came up over and over for me, the idea that you felt abandoned through much of your life. And I wondered, why did you feel so abandoned when you had a loving, your parents gave the ultimate sacrifice. They loved you so much that they gave you to another couple for safekeeping. Like, what made you feel so abandoned?
I think you meant orphaned, right? We used the word orphan in the book a couple of times.
I think that's what I wanted to switch to the word. I said the orphan. Okay. Orphan. I was with my step-parents. I felt the orphan. I felt the orphan because I lost my first parents, and then at the end I lost my husband.
Right.
So, all this, my inner struggle, that I overcome as far as my husband passed away. That was the bubble that busted. And I asked myself, and now what? I did all this, and now where do I go now? Who am I now? Am I the same person? But what did I learn from my journey until now? It was in 1993. And what I wanted to say a little thing about my son. Well, at that 1993, a few months before my husband passed away, we were coming both from the hospital. I was devastated. I was lost, devastated, and didn't know where to go. My Mitchell, I think, was 28 years old, so I was 53. At that time, I remember he turned to me and he said, "Mom, you told me a lot of stories about when you were growing up. Well, where is the little girl from Poland, from Bochnia, who fought the Bricks, who was always first, who had the strength? Where did you get the strength? Why don't you think about it and go back to it?" At that time, I couldn't think about it. She just did something to me. It opened up something in me. And then a few months later, my husband passed away, and I said, "Where is the little girl from Bochnia? What my son was talking about?" And I went to this back to this little girl, and where she found the strength. I found the strength from faith, from God. Yes, I felt the orphan. In a physical sense, I was an orphan. But at the 1993, I went back to this 5 years old girl, 2 years old girl, and at that time, I couldn't find an answer. I was a human and I was bitter, and I went to the wall, and I said, I have to talk to God. I always talk to Him. Let Him answer the question. And that is where my spiritual journey actually started.
So after Herman died, after Herman died, is that when you started your conscious writing?
Yeah, after Herman died, yes, my husband died, then I went, I was just, everything busted. I didn't know where I was. And the only thing what I could think about is what my son was telling me at that moment. Sometimes the moment is very important. That moment, I had nothing else. I said, where was my strength? And so I started to go back. And that's from that moment, the whole new book came out. My whole new life came up. I wasn't going to repeat my life. I said, God gave me this strength for some reason, for reason to dwell on it and to give a message. And that's why it's as far as my own life, I don't think I would ever written the book. But then I felt that it was a different, that I had this, God's calling me to do something with it. Whatever I had to learn, I had to convey to others. And so from that moment on, the new book, The Rose Temple, came out.
And
Mitchell, you want to say something?
I was going to add something that I've seen you mention before in some of your videos and some of your interests. I think my mother, as a woman going through this, is very different than if she was a man going through this, because I think part of it was my father was clearly he was the dominant person in our family. He was the leader. It was that generation where he was the leader. And so for all the years that I was growing up, my mother was a traditional Jewish mother fulfilling that role. And, I had seen in her some sort of inner strength. I couldn't explain it then because I didn't know her full story. I just knew that there was something there. There was some spirit there that was sort of bubbling over. And so that's where that phrase came out, when I knew she was struggling with him and his health and, probably fearful. Remember, fear was a huge part of her growing up. Fear of being alone. So she even if you're 2 years old, even if you don't remember things when we're 2, I mean, at some level, there's got to be some inner memory of being given away from your real parents and finding yourself in the arms of a strange couple. And then her adoptive family died soon after she got married, so she didn't have them. So there's a huge fear played a huge part of her early life, and I think there was a fear of her being alone. And she was widowed at age 53.
Right, very young.
And instead of seeking, which I frankly wanted for her, I said, after a couple of years had passed, I said, you deserve a man in your life. You deserve someone to share your life with. But by this time, she had already started her journey and was very resolute, and was gaining independence and gaining confidence.
Right.
And so I think that also speaks to some of the strength she had as a child and some of the strength that she carried through till today.
Well, Lucia, I have to say that I don't know how you went from being a Catholic to being an ultra-Orthodox Jew, because I can tell you I would never make it in that world. Never. It's just so hard. I mean, I couldn't even make it as a Reformed Jew. So I'm telling you, it's very difficult. Kudos to you for even, for doing it for so long.
I can answer that. Okay, so because I think because I was always spiritual, because I didn't know what spiritual means, but I always somehow had the inner connection with the higher power, with wherever I was. So when I was in church, I really didn't go to a depth of the teaching. I never had opened a prayer book. I only was talking to God like it would be right there.
Right.
So that was.
But I mean the rules. It's too many rules. I'm a big rebel. I don't like rules. I don't like people telling me what to do. So right away I'm like, I don't like religion. I left the temple, Judaism at 12, and I said to my dad, I'm never coming back to a temple ever. I'm going to pray in a field. I lived on a farm because that's closer to God in my heart. People didn't feel real to me. They didn't seem real, and I thought, you know what? That's not the relationship I want to have with God. And so I left. And I went back when my kids were born, and I left again for reasons I won't go into here. It's these rules are so rigid, and I wonder, do people thrive in that?
Well, I think the point is that it's the judgment. Rules are one thing. We each follow our convictions, our beliefs, not only interreligious but within our own religion. Like as you said, even within Judaism, it's the judgment that is problematic to me. I don't want to be judged by someone else for what I'm doing, and I don't want to judge anyone else. What they're doing. It's their relationship, so I don't think it has to be exclusive. If it's nature that appeals to you as a religious person, and you find a walk in the woods, as I've done on many occasions, when I'm praying in memory of my father instead of going to synagogue, sometimes I've just taken a walk on a trail and felt a much closer connection to him than I did in synagogue, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Some people, find it within the brick and mortar of a synagogue. So I think there's many paths. We just have to respect each other's paths.
I will tell you one thing, Lucia Mitchell. The one thing that I never would do, even though I don't practice Judaism, I would never ever say I wasn't a Jew. And I think the reason I said that is because most of my family perished in the camps. And so in honor of them, there's no way, and I tell my children, even if you don't practice it, you have to acknowledge it, because there has to be some sort of honor, to stand up for those people, because what happened to them was so horrific. And that kind of brings me to the point of the book, I think, and the question that most people ask. Every person that I know the Holocaust has touched, whether they were, Jewish or Catholic or homosexual or whatever, where was God? 11 million people. Where was God? How could he let this happen? And that was, kind of the question you were trying to answer, I think.
Yes, that was my journey, and that was my question. And through all my journey, I was trying to find out how God was a presence, and then I understood that God was a presence. That God was a presence when I was taken from my parents to the Świątek, to the Polish couple. He was always there. He was always there. Then I came, luckily married a wonderful man, had 2 children, and then I had the luxury to actually get to the spiritual journey, travel the world, and see his presence everywhere. Whatever he is not what people ask, and what I ask is about he does not always show his power, because we have a free will. I have a free will as a child. Should I be in the first row or the last row? He didn't tell me which row. He gave it to me, but he was there. And when I went to the first row, he was there. He supported me. I felt his presence. So to look through my life and then through my journey, and then when I went in 1993 to the wall and I was angry with him, where were you? Why did you leave me alone? Well, I was an orphan. That's the first time. What do you have for me now? I don't know. I was angry. And then I said, well, however, he took care of me all this lifetime. He must have a reason for it. So his presence was there. I was right, because through the spiritual journey, I found he was right there. I was connecting to him. I heard his voice. I wrote his road. I wrote his words. They were not mine. That was the biggest gift what I received, to find his presence in my writing, in his voice in my writing, and that's his voice I am going to present to others. It's not only for me what I have to convey, it's for other people to learn what my life was. So it is my personal experience. I don't think it's other people. Everybody has his own experience. Everybody has his own way to find God or not to find him. I felt that I received the biggest gift when I heard his voice inside me, when I could communicate with him, when he told me, your work will help to rebuild the temple. Even I didn't know what the temple was, but I trusted in the voice. I trusted in his message. And the temple is there. The Rose Temple is not from bricks. It's a book. It's everybody can learn. Whatever they can learn from it is a gift. What I receive, I convey to others. So that is so far. I am not done with my journey. I might find out more things. I write more messages. But as for now, this is my own personal experience, how I find his presence. But I had to be open. I had to make the choice to hear the voice.
Right.
I had the choice to follow it. And that is my biggest gift.
So Frankie, I don't think that, the answer to the question that we all ask, and it
right.
could be the Holocaust, and it could be any tragedy. It could
right.
be Rwanda. It could be any. Unfortunately, things didn't. We thought things might get better after 1945, but they haven't. The world has been in a lot of turmoil since then, and so we have to ask ourselves the question, not just my mother, but all of us. You ask the question, so where's God? Why are people suffering? Why are children dying? What is going on? I don't have the answer. I don't think any of us have the answer. I don't think
no.
Any
But what if God is us, and what if it's our responsibility to stop these things? And maybe I mean
that's exactly right.
If there's a piece of us, that is a God spark in us, then that is our responsibility. And if these horrible tragedies happen, I can just imagine that God is crying and thinking, they haven't learned. They haven't learned yet. I think we're on we're at an axis of the spiritual. There seems to be more spirituality in the world. There seems to be more people embracing spirituality. There seems to be a lot of negativity. But hopefully I mean, I see even with just, the United Nations coming out with their global goals, that is something concrete and positive that we can all sink our teeth into for the next 15 years. 17 amazing initiatives that are going to address a lot of the problems around the world. I mean, I think that's awesome. That's a step forward.
Well, that's exactly right. So there's an expression in Hebrew called tikkun olam, which is to repair or to heal the world. Mm-hmm. That may be a Jewish expression, but I think it's also a universal goal of other religions and many peoples, and I think that's what you're referring to. Mm-hmm. And I think you're doing your part through your radio show and your other activities, and I think through our book and our work, I think we're longing for the same goal.
Mitchell, have you experienced messages from God in the way your mom does?
I did, and I have to say, you can never, until you step into somebody's shoes, you never really get what they're. It was scary. It was one thing for me. It was one thing for me to interview my mom, as I did throughout the book, and get her stories and write them down and sort of convey them. It was another thing when I got them myself. It is scary.
How did yours manifest? Tell me. Can you tell us? Come on.
Oh boy, I think I was. I remember I was in a basement. I was in a dark basement, in a dream, and my father was there. He had already passed at that time, and I remember I was scared, and I thought I can't remember if it was me or him or somebody was in danger, and I felt the presence of God saying, "Don't worry, you will be in the Garden of Eden." And I was like, where did that come from? I remember just waking up shaking and really sensing that was God. So it's.
What do you think that meant?
I didn't know at the time. Maybe this is the path that I'm on and that I'm doing. And maybe this is the path that God wants me to be on. It's got to be, because life has taken too many strange twists and turns.
Lucia, you've had a lot of symbolism, in your life, and I found it very interesting that the first synagogue you went to was actually the synagogue that your daughter, Mitchell Paula, ended up getting her bat mitzvah in Poland. That's curious.
Oh, that was so meaningful, and there's an interesting story to that. So when my mother was first reconnecting with the Jewish community in Poland, she was asked by some folks who had known her parents to attend a Rosh Hashanah service at a temple. It was called the Temple Synagogue in Krakow. And she went, and of course, as you can imagine, it was completely strange to her.
Yeah.
Church services are very different than synagogue services. Synagogue services.
One's in Latin, one's in Hebrew.
Well, the Hebrew for one thing, right? But church services are very quiet and dignified. Synagogue services tend to be a little bit more rambunctious. So I think that was a shock. And you're right. All those years later, I had been to Poland several times with my mother, and we were looking for this temple synagogue, and we never found it. And I think there may have been a part of her that didn't want to find it. She wasn't ready to kind of relive those memories, and it was I think a very traumatic one for her, going to that synagogue.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So it was a traumatic memory, I think, of going to that synagogue, and so she didn't remember it. And just by happenstance, when I was looking for, my daughter is the one who felt very connected to my mother, very connected to her story. She wanted to have her bat mitzvah in Poland. We made arrangements with the rabbi there, and he happened to pick this synagogue. But we still didn't make the connection until we actually arrived there. And so I think you're right. It was coming full circle. And the nice thing about it was that we actually had one of my mother's dear classmates there, her first time ever in synagogue.
Wow.
Just as my mother had been in church. It was a real sort of coming together and coming to circle, and it was a beautiful moment.
That was the girlfriend who was holding my hand during the Passion. That I was painting. Well, we kept in touch, and I invited her to the bat mitzvah, my granddaughter, and she came. And
that's beautiful.
and I was holding her hand in the synagogue, and
Aww.
that was amazing. Yeah, but that was a very dramatic thing because I went from church to the synagogue, and it was such a difference, and I was so confused. I was loyal to the Catholic Church, to my step-parents, and then I went to the temple. I didn't know how to connect the whole thing. I thought I was torn between two worlds, that they never come back together. And that was a very dramatic time in my life. I left the services and I went on the train back to my parents, and I thought that I had to, at that time, on that station, I thought I had to leave all my, if I want to pursue my new life with my people, I have to create a vault and put all my life in the vault and lock it. So that was a very painful decision what I had to make, but I made. That was my choice, and then that was my turning point in my life. And
I was shocked. Lucia, sorry, we only have a couple of minutes, 4 minutes left, so I want to get some stuff in. But I was really shocked that in 1961, the communists wouldn't let you leave Poland. Like, I thought it was so late, like 60s, you know, and yet they're not allowed, they don't want you, just like in Russia, they don't want the Jews, but they don't want them to leave either. I don't understand that.
Well, I was involved in some activities. I was getting money from my family from New York, and that was not legal. And then, you know, that was one of the things that I was going to be in jail. And then by sheer luck, with the headmaster of my gymnasium, which always was my mentor, I went to him, and he was able to help me to escape to freedom, and that's what it was.
And when you left, it really was kind of, you thought, that was it, I can never come back, goodbye.
I could not come back because I had to give up my Polish citizen, and then I went on the Israeli visa to Israel, and then I knew that I could never return to Poland and never see my step-parents again. That was a very traumatic thing for me.
Your stepmother, she seems like such a wonderful woman.
She was like an angel to me. I don't think she was human. She was an angel. I could not do no wrong. I could not imagine a woman who was so devoted to me and to whatever I do. Children are sometimes rebelling, and I was a normal child. But to her, I was everything. She took me to church. She took me to, and then when I had difficulties in Poland, when I was this prosecuted or whatever. She was the one who found the letter from my relatives a long time ago, and she took me back to the Jewish community. She said maybe they can help you. She had no idea that I would live forever, but she was selfless.
Yes. When does the book come out? Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just that we've only got a minute and a little bit.
The book is going to be released in early March of 2016.
Okay, and the website is?
The website is up now.
Yes.
It's therosetemple.com.
Okay, so there's some pictures and there's some links on that website.
Pictures, links, and some blogs, and yes, and there's going to be some new material up on that site very shortly.
Okay. So, again, the book is called The Rose Temple. We've been speaking with Lucia Weitzman and her son, S. Mitchell Weitzman. I want to thank both of you so very much for coming on the show and speaking. And, Lucia, I just want to say you are, like, just an incredible, brave, courageous woman, and thank you so much for sharing your gifts with the world and trying to find, some peace and for all of us and sharing that message. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you for having us on, Frankie.
Thank you, Frankie.
Thanks. Stay in touch, please. Everybody, wherever you are night or day in the world, we thank you for listening. And if you're downloading the show, thank you again for doing so. We look forward to speaking to you the next time. Take care now. Bye-bye. Goodbye, everybody.
it's Flo, and this is my impression of a traveling lounge singer. And we're going up the airport escalator. Hey, where you from? No response. Classic. Got in an accident, so you gotta take a cab, huh? No cabs at Progressive service centers. They got rental cars on site, which is out of sight, you know?
Progressive takes the hassle out of claims. Just drop your car off at one of our service centers and we'll manage the rest.
Here's a little number I like to call Waiting for the Shuttle Bus.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Service centers not available in all areas. You have a choice of repair facilities.